The bell above the door of the bistro on Maple Street gave a small, tired chime, the same chime it had given for almost 30 years. Outside, the morning was soft and gray, the kind of morning that made people pull their coats a little tighter and walk a little slower. Inside, the smell of coffee and warm bread filled the air like a memory. Grace Whitfield moved through the doorway carefully, the rubber tips of her crutches finding their rhythm against the tile floor. Her prosthetic leg caught the light for just a moment and a few heads turned, the way heads always turned quickly and then looked away, embarrassed to have looked at all. Grace was used to it. She had learned over the past 2 years that most people were not unkind. They were only unsure, and being unsure made people quiet. She scanned the little cafe for an open table. There were none. The morning crowd had claimed every chair, every bench, every corner. Except for one table near the window, where a man sat with 2 small children. He looked tired in the particular way that fathers alone with young children often look tired, a tiredness that lived behind the eyes rather than in the body. On his lap sat a little girl with a cloud of curly hair, wearing a soft lavender sweater, her small hand resting on the table like she was keeping watch over it. Beside them sat a boy, maybe 7 or 8, in a green sweater, arms folded, staring out at the street with the solemn patience only children learn too early. Grace hesitated. She did not like to ask. Asking meant explaining herself, and explaining herself meant people noticing her leg, her crutches, the space she took up in the world now that she moved differently than she used to. But her arms were tired, and there was nowhere else to sit. She walked over, slow and steady, and asked the question that would end up mattering more than she could have known. "Can I sit here?" The man looked up. His name was Daniel Reyes, though Grace did not know that yet. He had kind eyes, the kind that had seen some hard years but had not let those years turn hard themselves. He glanced at the empty bench across from him, then back at her. "Of course," he said. "Please." That was all. No pause, no hesitation. No look down at her leg and back up again, the look Grace had learned to expect and brace against. Just an answer, plain and warm, the way you'd answer a neighbor. Grace lowered herself into the seat, leaning her crutches carefully against the wall beside her. The little girl in lavender watched her with open curiosity, the honest kind that only children still have, before the world teaches them to look away. "Your leg is shiny," the girl said. "Emma," Daniel said gently, though there was no scolding in it, just a soft reminder, but Grace smiled. It was the first real smile she had given a stranger in weeks. "It is shiny," she agreed. "I polish it every morning just like some people polish their shoes." Emma considered this with great seriousness. "Does it come off?" "It does, at night mostly. It gets to rest, same as the rest of me." Boy in green, whose name was Sam, glanced over now too, his folded arms loosening just slightly. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore," Grace said. "It did for a while, but I have good days now, more good days than bad ones." Daniel watched this exchange with something soft moving behind his expression. He had raised his children these past 18 months to ask questions instead of holding them in, to be curious instead of afraid. It was one of the few things he still felt certain he was doing right. Watching Emma and Sam talk to this stranger so easily, watching her answer them without flinching, without that careful, coded language adults sometimes used, gave him a small, quiet comfort he did not have words for yet. A waitress came by, refilled coffee cups, took Grace's order, a simple tea and a slice of toast, and moved on. Outside the window, the street was waking up slowly. A delivery truck idled by the curb. An older couple walked past arm in arm, moving at the unhurried pace of people who had learned that most things could wait. "You have beautiful children," Grace said, and meant it. Daniel's mouth curved, though something flickered behind his eyes, brief and quiet, like a cloud passing over water. "Thank you. It's just the 3 of us now. Their mother passed a year and a half ago." Grace's breath caught just slightly. "I'm so sorry." "We're getting there," Daniel said, and there was no self-pity in it. Only the plain honesty of a man who had done a great deal of grieving in private and had chosen, somewhere along the way, not to let that grief become the only thing his children saw in him. "Some days are harder than others, but we're getting there." Grace nodded slowly. She understood, more than most people could have guessed. what it meant to lose something enormous and still have to get up each morning and figure out how to live inside the new shape of your life. She had lost her leg in a car accident 2 years earlier, on a rainy November night that she still sometimes dreamed about. She had lost too in the months that followed, a version of herself she had not known she loved until it was gone, the version that ran without thinking, that danced without calculating her balance, that walked into a room without wondering what people would notice first. "May I ask what happened?" Daniel said gently. "You don't have to say. I only ask because Emma will ask eventually, and I'd rather you tell us in your own words than have her guess." Grace appreciated that more than he knew. A car accident. 2 years ago, I was driving home from my mother's house in the rain. She paused, the way people pause when a memory still has some sharp edges to it. "I spent a long time being angry about it, angrier than I want to admit." "That sounds fair," Daniel said. "Anger seems like a reasonable thing to feel when your whole life changes in one night." It was, but anger is heavy to carry every day. Eventually I got tired of carrying it. She looked down at her tea, watching the steam rise in slow curls. "My grandmother used to tell me something when I was young. She said, 'Grace, the Lord doesn't waste a scar. He just hasn't shown you what it's for yet.' I didn't understand that for a long time. I think I'm only starting to understand it now." Daniel was quiet for a moment, turning that over. "That's a fine thing to hold on to. Helps some days more than others," Grace admitted. "But it helps." Sam, who had been listening carefully, spoke up in the straightforward way children do. "My mom used to say something like that too. She said bad things don't get to be the end of the story unless you let them." Grace felt something tighten pleasantly in her chest. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "Was," Daniel said softly. "She really was." They sat together a while longer, the four of them, the way strangers sometimes do when a table becomes, briefly, something more than a table. Emma wanted to know if Grace could still ride a bicycle. Grace said she was learning to slowly with a special pedal, and that she had fallen off more times than she cared to count, but that falling off wasn't the same as failing. "It just means you're still trying," Emma said, as if this were the simplest fact in the world. "That's exactly right," Grace said. "You're a wise one too." Daniel found himself smiling more in that half hour than he had in weeks. There was something about watching his children speak so openly, so unafraid, to someone the rest of the world often treated with careful distance, that reminded him of the man he wanted to be for them. Grief had made him smaller for a while, quieter, more guarded. Watching Grace laugh gently at something Emma said, watching Sam ask his questions without embarrassment, reminded him that kindness did not require grand gestures. Sometimes it only required saying yes when someone asked to sit down. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel said as Grace gathered her crutches preparing to go. "My wife used to say that people show you who they are in small moments, not big ones. The way someone treats a waiter, the way someone answers a child's question. She would have liked you very much." Grace felt her eyes grow warm unexpectedly. "That's a lovely thing to say." "It's true," Daniel said. "And for what it's worth, thank you for asking to sit here. It's been a long while since this table felt like anything other than the three of us against the world." Grace steadied herself on her crutches, the rubber tips finding the floor the way they always did now, familiar as breathing. "Thank you for saying yes." Outside, the gray morning had begun to lift, thin sunlight breaking through the clouds and falling in long, soft lines across the wooden tables. Grace made her way toward the door, and as she passed, Emma called out, "Bye, Miss Grace. I hope you get more good days than bad ones." Grace turned back, and for a moment standing there in the doorway with the bell still faintly ringing above her, she felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Not pity, not curiosity, just simple, plain acceptance, offered freely by a family who had lost enough to know exactly what kindness was worth. "Me too, sweetheart," she said. "Me too." She stepped out into the softening morning, the light catching the polished metal of her leg, and for the first time in a long while, it did not feel like something to hide. It felt like something she had carried through, out the other side, into a day that had turned out, after all, to be a good one. Behind her, at the little table by the window, Daniel Reyes looked at his children and felt, for the first time in 18 months, that the empty chair across from them had not been empty at all. It had simply been waiting for the right person to ask if she could sit there. And sometimes that is how kindness finds its way into the world. Not through anything loud or dramatic, just a simple question asked with courage, and a simple answer given with an open heart. "Of course," he had said. "Please." Words. That was all it took to remind a grieving family and a woman learning to walk through a new kind of life that the world was still in its quiet and unassuming way, full of grace.